If you are using GKE Autopilot, you can focus on building apps rather than managing notebooks because it's Google's responsibility. But if you know what is shared responsibility model, you know that securing workloads is your responsibility. In this video, I'm gonna show you how you can enforce restricted pod security standard in GKE Autopilot using Kyverno and Kustomize. In GKE Autopilot documentation, you can find which conditions are fulfilled by default by GKE Autopilot related to baseline and restricted pod security standards. Most of baseline pod security standard conditions are fulfilled by default, so you cannot, for instance, run privileged container in GKE Autopilot, but you can, for instance, run container as root, which is not compliant with restricted pod security standard. If you want to enforce restricted pod security standard, you can use Kyverno, which is modern and much more simpler mechanism than, for instance, open policy, agent, and gatekeeper. So Kyverno is policy enforcement mechanism for Kubernetes. In this quick demonstration, I'm going to show you how you can enforce restricted pod security standard using Kyverno. So we can check using kubectl what currently cluster policies are in our cluster. Okay, so no Kyverno policies are already deployed in cluster. Okay, so now I have here restricted policy namespace YAML, which is definition of cluster policy for enforcement on namespace level that all namespace must fulfill this pattern condition. So all namespaces must have this label, pod security Kubernetes IO enforce label with value restricted. So it's a very simple YAML. It's much more simple than REGO policies from Open Policy Agent. Okay, so we can create, before enforcing this policy, we can create namespace blue without any label. Okay, so okay, so wait a second, because I have already this namespace, and let's create namespace blue without any label. Yeah, and it's created. Okay, so we can delete this. Okay. And now we can apply this policy. Okay, so Kyverno policy created. Okay, and now we can try to create this namespace blue without any label. And we see that we cannot do this because our namespace creation request was blocked by Kyverno admission webhook. Yeah, because namespace must have this pod security Kubernetes IO enforce label with value restricted. Okay, so I have here blue namespace YAML with definition of namespace with this label. So we can create this from this file, and we see that namespace blue was created without any problems. Okay, we can also use Kyverno policies enforcing this restricted pod security standard on pod level. So we have second YAML with policy on pod level, and this creation on pod level is good, for instance, for auditing purpose, because we can use Kyverno reporting for all situations in which, for instance, development team wants to deploy something which violates this restricted pod security standard. So in Kyverno reports, we can find in a simple way all such situations. Okay, so we can apply this also. Okay. Now we can, for instance, run a simple image from Nginx, and we can see that this was blocked by Kyverno admission webhook. Yeah. So this is on pod level. So this is defense in depth, because previous policy guarantees that namespace without restricted label cannot be created, and this policy ensures that on pod level you cannot create pod which violates conditions related to restricted pod security standard. And of course, the next level is pod security standard admission webhook. Yeah? So we have a few layers of security here. Okay, so now we can concentrate on using Kustomize, because in GKE Autopilot you cannot use mutation webhooks, so you cannot use Kyverno to enforce that all, for instance, deployment creation requests will be modified to fulfill restricted pod security standard, because mutation webhooks are restricted in GKE Autopilot, and you cannot use Kyverno in mutation way. You can use only validation way using Kyverno. So good way is to use Kustomize. So I will show you quick demonstration. So here we have deployment, very simple deployment, 2 replicas, Nginx container, yeah. And the second YAML is security patches, which applies patches to this deployment with things like, for instance, run as non-root with value true, with allow privilege escalation set to false, and capabilities with drop all capabilities. Yeah. So all conditions related to restricted pod security standard. And we can use Kustomize to build target deployment. Yeah, and we can see that target deployment contains logic from this deployment YAML and logic from security patches YAML. So we can say that, for instance, for this deployment YAML can be responsible development team, and for this security patches YAML can be responsible security team. And you can use this to enforce that restricted pod security standard will be fulfilled. Okay, and you can use in production Argo CD, for instance, or other GitOps tool, like for instance Flux, which have support for Kustomize. So all GitOps tools, like for instance Argo CD or Flux, have support for Kustomize. So this way you can enforce that in pre-deployment phase, that all, for instance, deployment pod or pod creation requests will be modified to fulfill restricted pod security standard. And these security patches also will override all situations in which development team will try to bypass, for instance, restricted pod security standard. So, for instance, in situations in which in deployment YAML there will be privileged escalation set to true, in a security standard there will be allow privilege escalation set to false. In target YAML there will be allow privilege escalation set to false. Okay, so this is all for this video. Thank you for this video, and I'm gonna show you in next videos next security tips for GKE Autopilot. So thank you, see you.